Motorsport has many fundamental elements that without would lead to racing feeling bland and boring. Most of these elements seem obvious: speed, overtakes, and machinery pushed to the absolute limit. But there's one guilty pleasure we all indulge in when watching motorsports, and that is the crashes. In modern motorsport, and especially in modern Formula 1, safety has become so advanced that when we see large crashes, we can be fascinated by the spectacle, knowing most of the time the driver is safe and will walk away from the crash. But F1 has had to come a long way for this to be the case, and it would be wrong of me to start this video without talking about one of the strangest crashes in F1 history that Alberto Ascari had during the 1955 Monaco Grand Prix. Stirling Moss had retired from the race with an engine issue, and therefore Ascari had inherited the lead. But luck would not be on his side. As he came through the chicane du Port on lap 80 of 100, he misjudged the entry and sent his car flying through the hay bales and into the depths of the Monaco harbour. He wasn't, however, the only driver to do this. When 10 years later, driver Paul Hawkins did the same thing, being plunged into the Mediterranean Sea. The crashes into the harbour are even referenced in the 1966 F1 film Grand Prix. Both Hawkins and Ascari would walk away from the crashes, but Ascari sadly passed away just 4 days later when testing a Ferrari at Monza, crashing where the now legendary Ascari chicane is placed, forever honouring his name. But this isn't the only deadly crash Monza saw. In 1961, the race at the Italian Grand Prix would take a dark turn. At this time in F1, safety was of very little concern, and the crowd lined the side of the tracks, often with hay bales and small barriers as their only protection. As driver Wolfgang von Trips was racing Jim Clark, von Trips caught the rear wheels of Clark and spun towards the crowd. The crash caused the death of 15 spectators and von Trips himself. Thankfully, race organisers would finally get rid of straw bales after the next incident in 1967 with Lorenzo Bandini. For this crash, we're once again back at Monaco, with this time 1967 champion Denny Hulme leading the race and Bandini was holding on to P2 behind. However, as he pushed the car to the limit, Bandini lost control and veered the car towards the barriers. This ruptured the much less secure fuel tanks of 60s F1 cars and caused a fire. However, with the hay bales lining the sides of the circuit, Bandini struggled to escape from the flames and died 4 days later in hospital, suffering from third-degree burns. As mentioned before, F1 regulators made the decision to ban hay bales from all circuits after this major crash, but other safety features wouldn't prevent the next accident. Jochen Rindt is a man who holds a strange record that no other driver would be jealous of, being the only F1 champion to be awarded the title after their death. During the 1970 Monza Grand Prix, it was commonplace for teams to try and get the most straight-line speed possible out of their cars, and Rindt, driving the Lotus that year, had taken the wings off his car, allowing him to achieve top speeds of near 205 miles per hour. During a practice session before the Grand Prix, Rindt was on a fast lap with Denny Hulme driving behind him. Hulme reported this: on the run down to Parabolica, Rindt entered the braking zone, and when he hit the brakes, the car swerved right, then left, then back to the right, until swerving very quickly left again and straight into the guardrail. The crash into the guardrail was named as Rindt's cause of death, despite him not correctly securing his 5-point harness. The car had suffered from a brake failure in later investigations. The 70s were a dangerous time for F1 drivers, as the victim of our next crash would try and explain. The year is 1976, and an intense rivalry is reaching its peak between Niki Lauda and James Hunt. The next race is set to be at the Nurburgring Nordschleife layout, with Lauda in front in the championship. If you've seen the film, you'll know the story. Weather was forecast to be terrible for the weekend, and at the drivers' meeting, Lauda proposed the Grand Prix should not go ahead. Unfortunately, many drivers such as Hunt thought this was just Lauda trying to maintain his points lead, so refused to call the race off. Lauda therefore participated in the race, and his worst fears came true. He crashed the car, causing it to burst into flames, bounced back onto the track, being hit by another car. Lauda was not expected to survive this crash, but just 42 days later, he was back in F1 and racing, showing how resilient he really was. But the next driver would not be so lucky. Gilles Villeneuve had been tipped to be a remarkable driver, winning 6 Grand Prix in 6 years with the Ferrari team, and many thought of Villeneuve as being a future world champion for Ferrari. But everything would fall silent during qualifying for the 1982 Belgian Grand Prix at Spa. Everything was going as planned at the start of the day. Villeneuve Villeneuve crossed the start-finish line to begin his fast lap, and as F1 drivers do, put the car on the limit. As Villeneuve exited the first chicane and approached the second of the double right-handers, Jochen Mass saw the Ferrari coming quickly behind him. Mass moved to the right off the racing line to allow Gilles to pass, but at the same time, Villeneuve moved in the same direction to pass the slower car, causing both to collide. Villeneuve was flung in the air, losing his helmet in the process, and when doctors approached the driver, he was pronounced dead on the scene. Thankfully, the Villeneuve name did not die out in F1, with his son Jacques going on to win the 1997 championship after his own controversial crash with Michael Schumacher. But other crashes have caused controversy in Formula 1's history, with a crash in 1989, Suzuka Japan being one of them. McLaren had entered the season strong, bringing the best car and having a pair of championship-winning drivers in Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna, but this meant the rivalry between the two was intense. Suzuka was the penultimate round of the season, with Senna needing a race win to stay in the battle. When coming into the final chicane during the closing laps of the race, Senna and Prost collided, leading to Prost DNFing and Senna securing the win, except he didn't. Instead, Senna was disqualified for an unsafe rejoin onto the track, handing the 1989 championship to Prost instead. But this wouldn't be the only memorable crash Senna got into, as Emilia 1994 became one of the most painful weekends of Formula 1. It all began in qualifying. Rookie driver Roland Ratzenberger was coming through the Acqua Minerale chicane and ran over the curb, causing damage to his front wing. Instead of pitting to fix the damage, Ratzenberger stayed out to complete another fast lap. Coming towards Villeneuve Curva, his Simtek car reached speeds of upwards of 300 kilometers an hour for the first time since receiving front wing damage, and the aero gave up. The nose's underside snapped and the car flew up, leading to a loss of all grip and braking ability. Ratzenberger's car flew straight into the concrete wall with an estimated 500 G of force, and he passed away instantly. The race weekend would, despite this, continue, with the race being red flagged on lap 5, and at the restart, Senna and Schumacher took up the lead. As the race entered lap 7, Senna was approaching the Tamburello corner, and the car didn't make the turn, slamming Senna this time into, again, a completely unprotected concrete barrier. Ayrton also died on impact, and in his car was left an Austrian flag he planned to fly at the end of the race in honor of Ratzenberger. It was a weekend F1 would never forget. The next crash is thankfully a little lighter, and one David Coulthard will never forget. The 1998 Belgian Grand Prix got off to a very hectic start, with a huge pile-up just after turn 1, caused by the aforementioned David Coulthard spinning and creating the 13-car pile-up. The race was immediately restarted, with many teams, as allowed at the time, bringing out their third backup cars to restart the race with. During the race restart, pole sitter and championship leader Mika Hakkinen spun, and with teammate Coulthard taking the third car for the restart, was forced to retire. This gave Michael Schumacher, Mika's closest championship rival, a run for the crucial race win, and he took the opportunity. By lap 24, Schumacher had built up a 30-second lead over Hill in second, and he was coming up to lap David Coulthard. The track being as wet as it was, and the spray being so high, made visibility poor, and DC slowed down to let Michael pass. Schumi, however, went straight into the back of him, destroying his own front wheel and causing both cars to retire. Schumacher was understandably furious and walked over to confront DC, even threatening to hurt him, but the matter went no further. The next driver was lucky to not get hurt in this crash. Mark Webber forgot where the tarmac was in the next incident, which saw an F1 car crash in a way we've never seen before. During the 2010 European Grand Prix in Valencia, Mark Webber had exited the pits on fresh rubber in 19, and was quickly closing on the slower car of Heikki Kovalainen. But when he went to make the move, Webber caught the rear of Heikki's car and got sent flying in the air in spectacular fashion. Thankfully, a crash that would have once been fatal was survivable for Webber, and he walked away from the crash. But that does bring me to the last death F1 suffered from. The 2014 Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka was held in very wet conditions, and the Sauber of Adrian Sutil had spun off at the Dunlop curve. A tractor crane, therefore, had come onto the gravel trap to assist in taking Sutil's car off the track. When coming through the same corner, Jules Bianchi also also lost control of the car, crashing into the tractor and killing him instantly. It was the first death since Senna in 1994, and the last death in F1 to date, and led to the FIA introducing the virtual safety car and helped bring in the halo. And we've seen few races held in such wet conditions since. Many thought the next crash was going to be fatal, but with F1's advancements in safety, it wasn't. The 2020 Bahrain Grand Prix gave us visuals eerily similar to that of 1976, when during the opening lap of the race, Haas driver Romain Grosjean clipped the AlphaTauri of Daniel Kvyat and spun into the barrier, rupturing his fuel tank and causing the car to burst into flames. As Romain crashed through the barriers, the halo saved his head from severe injuries, and despite being engulfed in flames for a significant amount of time, much like Niki Lauda was, Grosjean escaped from the car, and to prove how far F1 safety has come, he had only minor burns to his hand, unlike Lauda's severe burns to his full body. Grosjean now continues to race in IndyCar to varying degrees of success. Let's just say Grosjean is maintaining his crash-happy reputation, which two other drivers gained during the next season. 2021 saw a battle between Hamilton and Verstappen for the World Championship, and when it came to controversial crashes, where do I even start? During the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, Max and Lewis were racing hard coming up to Cops. Max had the outside line, Lewis was on the inside, with Max slightly ahead into the corner. Now I may get crucified in the comments for this one, but in my opinion, Lewis misses the apex, drifts wide, and clips Max Verstappen's rear tyre, sending Verstappen into the tyre barrier, and Lewis took the win for that race. But the controversy would only continue at the Italian Grand Prix in Monza. Lewis came out of the pits slightly ahead of Max Verstappen, and by the time we got to the first chicane, the two were side by side, where again, in my opinion, Max catches the sausage curb on the inside, trying to stay next to Lewis, and his car jumps up, leaving him on top of the Mercedes. Lewis credits the halo to saving his life in this incident, and who can forget the most controversial crash of this season, which saw Nicholas Latifi create a butterfly effect by sending his car into the wall that led to Max's first championship. There have been many crashes in recent and past F1 that have come to define the sport. Thankfully, with safety improvements, we can appreciate this area of the sport more, knowing the drivers are safer than ever. I'm trying to become a real F1 YouTuber by putting out high quality content like this, so your subscription would mean a lot to me if you enjoyed the video. Thank you to the channel members who also help support this content come to life. Comment which crashes I missed, and goodbye!